We keep on moving, we keep on moving along, we keep on.
Welcome to another episode of Twentypreneur. I'm here with my brother Faizan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
Let's just hop right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what the business is you're building.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Faizan, as Jesiah said. I run a company called Speakeasy. It's a consumer tech company. We're building an app to help people get better at speaking. I've actually built a couple of companies or tried to build a couple of companies in the past. I've been doing this entrepreneurship thing for a while now. I went to Stanford and I studied computer science. I graduated in 2024. But my sophomore, junior year of Stanford is when I met my two best friends that I live with and run Speakeasy with. And our first company together was actually a clothing brand called 42, which is slightly unconventional as a Stanford student, but we're actually still running it to this day. It was kind of our first venture into building a consumer brand, selling things to people, building a very traditional business and understanding some of the basic language in business. And it's, like I said, something we're still very passionate about, especially right now as the World Cup's going on. But yeah, the main focus for us is this tech company, Speakeasy, and it's the thing that I've been the most passionate about in my entire life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You run a few different, you're running a business and you have a couple of other ideas you've done.
Yeah.
For the person out there that wants to get into entrepreneurship, from your perspective, what's more important, the idea or the founder?
It's a good question. I think so far in my life, which, you know, I have limited experience compared to a lot of other founders, I think it's the founder. I think that ideas are sort of just a ticket to entry into entrepreneurship. They change and evolve. Even an idea like the one that we're currently working on, Speakeasy, has evolved in the period of time that we've been working on it. And so like your idea is just the thing that gets your foot in the door. It's the thing that makes you want to get started. But really, I think the more important thing is you as a person, you as a founder, and some of the deeper psychologies that you might have that make you fit to be a founder, which we'll get into. But I think at a high level, that is more important than the idea.
Right.
Yeah.
The resiliency, the mindset.
Yeah.
Markets change.
Yeah.
Technology is changing the world.
Ideas
the entrepreneurs
change.
that persist are the ones that have the mindset.
Yeah.
Right. It's a way of life almost.
Yeah. It's a way of life. Yeah. I agree.
So I want to sort of help folks understand what are the components and things that go into starting a business and having that idea. I know you guys have been down a few rabbit holes in the past few years. I'm curious to understand, how many ideas have you guys walked away from as a team, and what led to that decision to not pursue it?
Yeah. I think we've walked away from so many ideas. And, I'm counting any idea as something that even just came up casually in conversation as an idea that we might have walked away from. But it varies. There have been ideas that we've actually pursued and taken pretty far, taken seriously for weeks or months and walked away from. I would say I off the top of my head, can remember at least 3 different ideas that we entertained for a while. We did somewhat of a due diligence on it and then walked away from. I think that some quick context, something that I read when I first started getting into startups when I was at Stanford and when I was talking to Kenny and all that, is there are 2 types of founders. There are mercenaries and there are visionaries. I think a visionary, and this is a loose definition based on what I remember, is someone who, as the word says, has a vision for something that should exist in the world or some way that the world should be, and they build a startup or a business to realize that vision. A mercenary entrepreneur is one who is more passionate about just building a business or a startup. They are more indifferent to the actual product or idea that they're pursuing. They evaluate that based on its business potential and its value, and rather than evaluating it based on its merit as an idea to them or its impact on the world. I think both are valid. A lot of the startup Silicon Valley people that I learned around when I was at Stanford were the mercenary types. So they would do the whole need finding process to find ideas. They were pretty much indifferent to what idea that they pursued. What Kenny, Milo, and I, which are my 2 co-founders, learned is that we are visionaries. We're not so much mercenaries. We believe in building a business that aligns with who we are as people, the things that we are passionate about inherently, the things that we want to see exist, the projects that we would work on even if we weren't founders, even if we were working a job. What would we do when we got home? That is sort of the way that we evaluate ideas. And so in the past, walking away from an idea was either because we ultimately found out that it just didn't align with ourselves in the way that we think a visionary founder would, or because it aligned too much with ourselves, say stuff in the fashion space, but it just didn't have a viable business opportunity, especially when we started in fashion.
Yep.
That is a difficult industry. There are a lot of ideas there that sound good, but it's just such a cutthroat industry and the margins are bad. And so we, upon working on it, just realized that the amount of effort we were putting into this would not realize into the success that we needed from it.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
You know, it could be the fashion one or another one, but what's an idea you guys kind of did the due diligence on and decided to walk away from, and what were the lessons that you learned taking into your next business?
I think that the most distinct one was last year, early 2025. So this was before Speakeasy. We, up until this point, had only been working on 42, the clothing brand. And we had a ton of experience with the clothing brand. We got pretty good at it. You know, our MRR, our ARR was all looking good. And we were also all CS majors at Stanford. So we were passionate about technology. And we started 42 because we had this vision, this thesis that fashion and tech had a potential of being very symbiotic, mutually beneficial in a way that hadn't really been done before. And as we saw all of these AI tools emerge that helped business owners or regular consumers like you and I basically have the power of coding in our hands with no problem, we saw a business where clothing brands or fashion companies could now build tech, software-oriented experiences without having to know how to code or having to hire an engineer. We thought this was something that clothing brands would be intrigued by because it's a way to provide an experience or a product to your consumer without charging them anything, which kind of changes the business model that's traditional in clothing brands, right? Right now, we just sell you a t-shirt or an item of clothing, you have to pay us. And that's really the only way you can interact with the brand. But we saw a world where clothing brands could now provide a digital experience, say a pop-up or a web game or a shopping experience that is completely free but contributes to their ability to exist as a unique brand that separates them from other brands. The way we would kind of phrase it at the time was it being kind of like a cursor or a lovable for clothing brands. So an app builder for clothing brands. Yeah. And it's something that we thought would be viable because it's something we ourselves as clothing brand founders wanted. Yep. That's how we evaluated the idea in the beginning. But we walked away from it because we again pursued the idea. We even tried to raise money for it. We applied to YC. We talked to other investors about it. And there were people that were excited about it. There were people that didn't see the vision at all. But what we eventually realized is that there had been companies in the past that had tried to provide somewhat adjacent experiences, things that were somewhat similar to this, and they didn't go anywhere. There was really no proof of traction or any record to suggest that this type of an idea had any water. Like it didn't hold any water at all. And you know, you can delude yourself for a while in thinking that even if your idea has no history, that you might be the first to materialize it. But what we learned is that in building a business, especially a business that's consumer adjacent or even B2B2C, so like something that plays in the consumer space, there is kind of a proven better new framework that you should follow. This is something that we stole from, I think his name is Mark Pincus. He's the founder of a gaming company called Zynga, where you want to build companies that at least have some testament to justify their existence. They copy something that has already been proven in the past and then make it better or add something new on top of it. And the idea that we were trying to build was simply too new. Clothing brand founders were so inexperienced or so unfamiliar with software and technological experiences that they really had no interest in having like a web builder tool. And so no matter how much we tried to sell it, nobody would really buy it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It sounds like one of the keys in finding your ideas, if you have an idea, look at the history, what models have been similar to indicate if this might be successful in the future. I think something that I'm looking at personally as an entrepreneur additionally is the industry, right? Is it growing? Right? It sounds like for you guys, a plus here was there's a B2B component of it, maybe a recurring revenue piece of it as well. And then you also talked about margins. So what are the margins in a business like this? You mentioned in clothing, it's pretty slim.
It's slim.
So, right, that might mean that founders of clothing brands might not have the money to invest in this kind of thing,
exactly.
Right? So there's a lot of different factors that go into choosing the right idea. And you can systematically go about it, right? History, industry, margins, all these kinds of things before you go too far down the rabbit hole. So how'd you land on what the problem you're solving today?
Yeah. Speakeasy is a company that I always say is something that I would have always built. I think I remember telling myself that when I first was going like post-grad and I was just going to work a job or go into finance or do whatever, I would always tell myself that one day I'll be like 30 or 40 or 50 years old. I'll hopefully have retired from working corporate or working a job. I'll have made it, whatever that means. And at that point, I will finally have the time and the resources to pursue the problem I'm passionate about, which is helping people get better at speaking. So the problem in and of itself is something I've always wanted to solve. In fact, it's a problem I've been very, very close to and adjacent to my entire life. I was a speech debate coach all throughout high school, a lot throughout college. I was involved in a lot of speaking and presentation classes in college. I would take students in high school and middle school level when I was in college. It's just something that I'm passionate about at a personal level. And we landed on building it now because the technology actually emerged right at a time where it became necessary. So the two factors that kind of really the one factor that led to this was the emergence of AI. The big thing here was voice AI became very viable. Our phones can now actually hear us. It's not just dictation. When you're speaking to your phone, if the right models are built into it because of AI, it can hear the way you sound, what you're saying, it can, derive some of your emotional intonation. So the technology was now at a place where it can give you the same feedback on your speaking that I, as a human being, could give you. So the technology justified its existence. But the bigger societal trend was that now that AI as a technology is consuming everything, right? It's consuming coding, it's consuming writing, it's consuming analysis. All of these entry-level jobs that are very technical are now starting to become eaten up by this technology that can do it. A big worldview that I had and still have is that speaking as a skill will be the one thing that human beings are reduced to. Within the next 5 to 10 years, this will be what separates us from technology, from the machines, is the fact that we can communicate and empathize with other people and that we can understand them. And so the one thing that will make me an attractive candidate for a job or a successful person in 5 to 10 years is my ability to communicate. The one thing that tech cannot do. And so both of these things compelled us to build a company to try and prepare people for that reality that I think is inevitable regardless. And that very technology also enabled us to build a product that can actually do that for you.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
This is really powerful mission.
Yeah.
And I can see the thought and lessons from your previous businesses that you're taking into this.
Yeah.
I know you guys have raised a seed round.
We raised a pre-seed round.
Pre-seed round.
Yeah.
I want folks to get an insight into what that looks like.
Yeah.
But let's just start with the decision to raise money versus bootstrap.
Yeah.
What went into that?
Yeah, it's a good question because for us, a lot more went into it than I think traditional startup founders that I'm used to. So again, I went to Stanford and everyone there, or a lot of people there, are startup founders, tech startup founders. And for them, raising money is no question, right? That is the first step. Sometimes even before they have an idea, they'll raise money because they're playing the venture game, and bootstrapping a business isn't even really in the conversation there. It's different for us. We built a clothing brand. We bootstrapped that clothing brand. So we my co-founder Milo actually took out debt to build this clothing brand that we eventually were able to pay off because of the success of the brand. So we saw the merit in bootstrapping. Eventually, after years of building a bootstrap business and considering building more, especially that are specifically in tech, we came to realize that if we wanted to build a startup that is a tech startup, not like a traditional business that's like clothing brand or a small lifestyle business, something that is very much a venture scale business, the only way to succeed in that game is by raising money. Speed is everything in the tech startup game, and you can't really achieve speed without taking care of the capital problem. For us, that meant raising money. It's not like building a tech company is necessarily a capital intensive business, but when you are too worried about budgets or you're sort of penny pinching or worrying about the cash flow and income statements at the early stages of building a tech startup, something that's supposed to change the world, it can really affect the outcome. And that's what went into raising money. I don't want to say it was a no-brainer. It wasn't. It was something that we put a lot of thought into, but we always knew that if we wanted to build a pure tech startup business, we would have to raise venture money for it. And also that is kind of sort of the entry ticket to this game that we've chosen to play, which is building a venture scale business. That's its own field. I think it's completely different from, or very different from, any other sort of business that you build.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So what did it look like to raise your pre-seed round? Like, how did you build relationships with investors?
Yeah.
What were the activities that you guys were doing?
Yeah, it was a interesting. So funny enough, it wasn't our first time trying to raise money. Like I said, for that idea that we walked away from eventually, the clothing brand, we had kind of attempted to raise money. We had conversations with investors. And even before that, when we were doing just the clothing brand, we had entertained the idea of talking to investors. It was something that we just kind of flirted with, really. We never really pursued super seriously. Speakeasy was the first time that we really aggressively pursued it. In terms of starting it, the relationships with the investors started at Stanford, I will say, and that's something we're very lucky with. Kenny, for example, was in a club called SVCC, I believe that's Stanford Venture Cardinal Club. It is very much just like a venture capital kind of organization that connects you with popular VCs in Silicon Valley. So admittedly, a big advantage that we had coming into this was the school that we went to, the people that we knew at that school. Also, a lot of people that we were friends with or older alum had built a startup, and so they had investor relationships. So that first email was easier. We had these warm introductions to these investors. There are also these, kind of mainstream investor like accelerators like YC and Speedrun and all that you can just find online and apply to. We would also try and get referrals for them. That's how the conversation started. But after that, it is, I don't want to say demoralizing, but it is kind of a rat race of a process. You send out all of these emails, and your email is kind of just this like elevator pitch. Like, hey, I'm building this business, would love to discuss prospect of raising. Again, we had an advantage. We had these warm intros to these investors. We had Stanford in these emails that we wrote. So I think it made people more likely to respond. But then you get all of these like 30-minute coffee chats booked with these investors where it's not clear or not whether or not you're going to pitch, but you get on the call with them and essentially you're pitching. You're pitching your startup to them, right? And they get to know you, they get to know your founders. They clearly have a lot less stake than you do. And at this time, we're like 22, 23-year-old, we're like kids going up against these investors. And it can be defeating because, especially for us, we're building a consumer business. Consumers very unpopular. We know that. Most AI startups in this new era are all B2B. If you look at every YC portfolio company, they're literally all B2B. So we knew that we were at somewhat of a disadvantage in terms of how attractive our business idea was because people are scared of consumers. It's an incredibly difficult business to build. Luckily for us, we had experience working together, and we had experience working together in consumer, building a relatively successful consumer company. I think that was something that helped us and made us more attractive. And another thing that really helps is once you can really, with investors, so many people say no and make you feel so demoralized about your idea and give you that existential crisis. But just like with startups and with business, you only need one. You only need one person to believe in you or the idea that you're building or the team that you're with. And if you just get that one, then there tends to be a lot more follow-on.
Yep.
We were lucky enough to have an investor, his name's Brooks, at a fund named Sci-Fi, who believed in us. And I think we did like 3 or 4 different calls with him. Each time we were like pitching and he would like poke holes in it. These people are serious, they're ruthless, and they're very, very meticulous in how they're evaluating you. And it tested our integrity, it tested our determination in the idea, and it really tested our ability to think through the idea and defend it. And so I think it was good for us and for the business. But once that happened, we were able to raise that first check. Then after that, it became a little bit more seamless to have like 2 or 3 more conversations, finish out the round, close it, and then finally start building the business.
Right.
Yeah.
Iron sharpening iron when you're talking to those investors.
Yeah.
But that's really insightful. It sounds like the network was really valuable to have.
Very valuable. Yeah.
And then your team being together for 3+ years, having that track record was also important.
Yes.
That's really good.
Definitely probably the most important thing was the team.
Yeah.
I think that was the most important thing. I think most times actually investors, and I think this is universal, no matter what school you went to, the investors care more about the team than the idea, to go back to your original question.
Yep.
They know the same thing that you should know, which is that your idea is probably going to change. Most startups pivot within their first year to 2 years. I think all investors know that. So what they're doing really is they're trying to see how much you as a team have evaluated this idea, how much you've thought through it. And if you guys have to pivot, how capable will you be to take on a new idea or to recognize the opportunity to pivot? And I think our investors saw that in us because of all of the stuff that we had been through before that. And that's kind of what led to our initial.
Right. They're underwriting you.
Yeah.
And the team.
Absolutely.
Not I mean, the idea, but I think what really shines through is how you articulate it.
Yes.
Your thought process for landing on it and your thesis.
Yes.
You kind of just answered my next question, which was the key things investors want to see in order for them to trust you guys to be good stewards of their capital.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to add on that? Like what were the questions that you saw over and over?
Yeah, I would double click on the founder thing. I still think people sleep on that. I really think that is the most important. So they'll ask you as a founder what your experience is with this problem. The other thing is the problem itself, right? The most important business, or the most important component of building a successful business arguably is the problem that you're solving. Again, the solution that you're proposing to solve it might change over time, and ours still is, but the problem itself shouldn't be changing or shouldn't be something that you've made up. So I've seen investors really poke holes in that problem and the viability of building a solution to that problem. Do people really want to pay for something that will solve this problem for them? Because we're building a consumer business, one thing that really helps is the problem that we're solving is one that our investors themselves probably deal with. You know, when I'm telling you in a pitch call, like, you know, some percent of the world is afraid of public speaking or struggles in meetings or in presentations. I think some of our investors actually resonated with that on a personal level. A sentence that we heard often was, oh yeah, this is a product I would use. And the people who said that would sometimes be the same people that wrote checks for us. And so I think that the problem itself matters a ton. The solution matters to the extent that it is believable, thought through, understandable. But again, it's something they know will change. And then this is less apparent, especially because it's a tech company, but business model is somewhat important. It was more important whenever we were doing that, the lovable for clothing brands ideas, because that had to do with like margins and revenue splits with fashion companies. For this one, it's just like software subscriptions, so the business model is pretty standard. I don't think there were that many questions on it. But yeah, I would say if you've thought through the problems and you have conviction in yourselves as the founders, that's a pretty big start.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What do you think are the myths or misconceptions around raising money, or maybe even for you personally, like what surprised you the most?
Yeah, I think I only have opinions from my personal experience, so none of this is necessarily fact. I think that this isn't so much a myth or a misconception. It's just something I see a lot of happening. But like a lot of people or a lot of companies raise a lot of money, like a ridiculous amount of money in the beginning, and I don't really see the need for all of that. You know, you only need enough money to just survive. Time is the main form of capital that we have in the startup game. If you have enough time, you will eventually build a successful startup. I believe that applies to literally anyone that wants to build a startup. Time and determination are the two forms of currency that you need. Money just buys you those two things. And so you only need enough money to buy you that amount of things. So we raise money based on how much runway we needed. How much time do we think we need to build a successful startup, or how much time do we think we need until we can make some progress to get to the next round?
Yeah.
I see companies doing way more than that. Another misconception is necessarily needing to have traction or the idea executed before you raise the money. In our experience, this wasn't the case. That being said, you do need to have something that suggests that this idea is attractive, right? And if that something just means building a really low fidelity website or web app that's a prototype of your idea, and then showing to investors like, hey, this has some traction, people like this, or maybe letting them use it themselves, that can be enough to raise money. Again, they're investing in the founder and in the idea. They're not necessarily investing in the execution of it so far. And so I think that people might overestimate how much they have had to accomplish before they raise money. Again, I'm entirely aware of my privilege here, my advantage of coming from a school that investors are more likely to invest in. Yeah. But really, most of the people I know that built a startup raised money before they had anything. And so that's another thing.
Wow.
And then the final thing I would say is that I think that people just overestimate like how good they themselves need to be. Your conviction is probably your most important quality in this game. More than I think your technical capability, your raw intellect, even your network. I think just your pure conviction and determination. And luckily, that is the only quality really that you can control. There's a slider for that. You can't really control how smart or literate or technical you are. I mean, you can learn it, but conviction is an emotion. And so I think a lot of people defeat themselves before this process because they think that they're not smart enough, or that they're not good enough, or they're not experienced enough, or they're not old enough to raise money, or they didn't go to a good enough school or whatever. I don't think any of that is true. I think that it just changed the difficulty of the game, but I think that if you have a ton of determination and conviction, and it's evident in the way that you speak about yourself, in the way that you speak about your idea and how you articulate yourself, which is why I think it's such an important skill to have, then that can take you pretty far, at least in the raising money.
Yeah.
Raising
wow.
money game.
Wow. These are keys
Yeah.
for folks watching. I'm literally taking notes because I'm learning a lot as we're talking to. For the kid that maybe didn't go to like a Stanford, that wants to raise $250K next week, like what advice would you give them? What should they be doing right now?
Yeah, I think that kid needs to make sure first that the $250K that they're raising, or however much money they want to raise, deserves to be raised. And I know that sounds kind of like, that might sound a little like reductive, but it really is true. Like, you shouldn't be raising money for the sake of raising money. You basically want to be in a position when you're raising money where you are executing this idea that you have. You would be executing it whether or not you had money, but the thing between you and executing it is this 250 or 500K, right? You're already trying to make it happen. You're trying to build this business, and you genuinely are just bottlenecked by your lack of capital. If you're in that position, I think investors can smell that, and they can tell that, like, the only thing this person needs is money right now, and I have a ton of that, so I'll give it to him, right? But make some progress on the idea and the problem you're trying to solve, independent of money. I would even suggest act as though you already have the money. And if you already have it, what are you going to do? What would you do tomorrow? What would you do next week? And do those things. I promise you, it won't cost you the money yet. And once you've done a certain amount and you genuinely are hitting this wall of, I can't take the next step without having $500,000, without having $1 million, then that first email that you send out will be a lot easier to send. The other thing I would suggest you do is get really good, and this is not just me shamelessly plugging my own product, but get really good at speaking about your idea and yourself. That is the only form of currency we have in this game. Investors know nothing about you besides what you say and what you tell them and how you say it. And what they hear is as important as the words that you're saying, like how you're saying them. And so, it tends to be the case that a lot of more technical people that are more likely to build a tech startup may not be as strong of communicators or presenters, or they may not have ever had the need to sell themselves in this way. But that, like we said, they're investing in founders, you're selling yourself. And so you need to get really, really good at articulating your vision, yourself, your conviction. That is the best way. There are people that have gone through this process just off of their speaking skills alone. That have succeeded. And so those are the two things I would really suggest you think about. Yeah,
that's really powerful. It sounds like for folks that want to raise money, the first piece is, like you said, make sure it deserves to be raised. So get the ball rolling a little bit on your idea. I'm curious to hear for you guys. I mean, this could even be post raising money or before, but there's a lot of value in running experiments and sort of getting evidence that this is a problem. You don't necessarily need to have a crazy website or a fully fleshed out product built, but just some sort of evidence. I'm curious for you, and it could be for Speakeasy or another business. What have those experiments look like for you, and how they've been valuable in raising money? Yeah,
great question. That's a great question, and it's something we heavily believe in. Experimentation is important. Building a startup is very much just like and my co-founder Kenny really believes in this. Building a startup really is just a series of experiments, and then one goes right, and then that's your startup. For us, being in consumer, it's a little easier to run experiments because we have social media. So social media is your best top of funnel for running experiments if you're building a consumer company. I really believe that. If you can make videos or social media posts, whatever form that takes, about the idea that you have, essentially selling it, and then seeing just how much traction or virality those videos themselves get. You don't even necessarily have to sell anything or see how much they convert. You just have to see how much are people engaging with the potential existence of this idea. That tends to be a pretty good metric. And that's what we did when we first started working on Speakeasy. Is the very first thing I did was start this new TikTok page and start posting on it about the problem of speaking, the idea of building a product that helps you get better at speaking. I built, like I said, a really low fidelity website that I literally threw together using chat in like a couple of hours in the Poly Delta office. And and put it out, use that link in the videos that I would post on TikTok, see how many people click on that link, see how many people do it, what the feedback I would get was, shift the product a little bit to see what people interact with. Those experiments work. They give you so much conviction. You really just, have to get over yourself a little bit and be willing to post on social media. And that was the way that we would do that. And it's also how we ran experiments back when, like with this clothing brand, right? Yeah. Even for something as simple as, say, we design a t-shirt and we might have 5 different versions of this t-shirt. Which one of these should we put into production and make in bulk? We don't know. Why don't we make a TikTok or an Instagram reel for all 5 of the t-shirts? Let's see which one performs the best. That one is probably the one that people like the most. And so that's a good measure. Right. There are deeper experiments as you get further along. Right now, our experiments are less about social media and more about actual users we're bringing onto the product now. Yeah. We're not anymore validating the idea. We're now validating the shape of the product itself. But when you're in that early stage, when you're just trying to validate an idea, the best experiment for a consumer at least is social media. Yeah. Same thing goes for B2B. It's like, figure out a way to get in front of the user that you would be selling to if you had a product, see what that user's level of excitement is and their willingness to pay for that product however you can. And then from there, you'll know whether or not the idea deserves to exist.
Right. So let's move on to kind of, I guess, reflecting on your experience. I'm curious to hear, if you were to do this entrepreneurship experience journey over, again, taking you back to freshman year, Stanford or whatever, how would you do it differently, if at all?
That's a good question. I've never really contemplated that. To be honest with you, maybe this is like I don't know if this answer is right, but I don't know that I would do it any differently than it was done. I really think that like the journey we had so much personal, psychological, philosophical impact on me that was important. There were lessons that I learned the hard way that I think I really only could have learned the hard way. So yeah, would I go back and like tell myself those things so that I didn't have to go through these difficult experiences? Maybe that would have made success faster. But again, I think that entrepreneurship, building a startup, is mainly a psychological game. And then it's like kind of an economic or business or technical game or whatever, but it's primarily a psychological game. Patience, determination, intelligence are the 3 things that it's testing. And so the only way for me to learn those things would have been the hard way. I think that I think one thing I would have done is be less existential about everything. It helps that I'm doing this at this age. I'm 24. I luckily don't have a lot to worry about in life. I don't have kids to worry about or anything like that. Yeah. So the stakes for me might be lower than somebody who's 10 years older than me. And so that removes things. But I think that I didn't always remember that or remind myself of that in certain times when things were really difficult. I would very much existentialize everything. Things would be tragic whenever they would go wrong. And I also think it's important that I knew in these difficult periods that the things that you may not think will be difficult will be difficult. Like everything is difficult. Co-founder relationships, building a business with your best friends, might sound like fun and games, but it's hard. You're managing like 2 or 3 different relationships with one person, and this is a measure of psychological. It's kind of psychological warfare. So we're all working together, but also going against each other in certain ways because that's the only way we're going to succeed. Yeah. I think that when I was like in college, maybe I overthought that and like again. Whatever the opposite of trivialize is, that's what I did to it. I deeped it. Mm-hmm. What I should have known at that time is that these are signs of success. These are early indicators of playing on a winning team. I think that you can't really have like creative confidence or conviction in something without first having complete disparity or existential crisis about it. That is just the nature of life. Your mind is as obliged to the laws of physics as the rest of reality. And so those low points that I was at where I thought that I was making the completely wrong decision or I was pursuing the completely wrong idea or I was completely unfit for this, those were times that I was actually like learning incredibly important lessons and preparing myself in ways that I needed to be prepared. And I think it would have helped a little bit if I knew that at the time, right? So that I didn't like deep it as much.
Yeah, right. And I mean, what you're saying about your team and the journey you guys have been through, I want to dig into that a little bit more. Yeah. So talk a little bit more about the team that you're building these businesses with. Yeah. Like that sounds like the most valuable asset you can have.
Without a doubt. That is the most valuable asset. That is the best part of this experience. So again, it's me, Milo, Kenny. Milo is our CPO, Chief Product Officer, and Kenny's our CTO, Chief Technical Officer. And the TLDR of how we met, I met Milo back in the summer between sophomore, junior year of college. We were both living in New York. I was interning in finance and he was interning at like a startup. And we are very different people, incredibly different. And so I remember a lot of people were very surprised when we first started hitting it off. And even we were surprised because I was kind of like your typical finance bro, you know, wearing like leather shoes and like a button-up dress shirt, and he was like a fashion starved artist type, and so we were just like aggressively different. But we had all of these common interests or similarities, or the things that we were into were kind of like puzzle pieces that fit perfectly together. We were into the same things, but interested in different aspects of those things. And that made for really good conversations. And I remember within a month of becoming friends, we started like bouncing ideas off of each other and talking about the possibility of working on something together. It was never like we should build a startup bro kind of thing. It was more of just like if I were to do this, like, what would you think about that? And it was literally just fun back and forth. That's all it was. I met Kenny the summer after, also in New York. I was again interning in finance. Kenny was, I think at the time, working in Pinecone. He is a true tech bro, as true as it can be. He's interned at every big tech company. He's a cracked engineer, and he's really into startups specifically. And so I had been working with just Milo up until that point on his clothing brand, just for fun. I was kind of the business end and he was the design end. And then we brought Kenny on. We didn't really know in what capacity. We just brought him on because the three of us wanted to work together. I introduced the two of them. They hit it off too. And then they lived in New York the following summer after that. So 2022, 2023, 2024, every combination of us lived in New York together. And we all just, increased our chemistry in that period of time a lot and became really close friends. And what makes us, I think, interesting is that the three of us, again, are aggressively different people. And that is immediately evident upon even just like meeting them and dapping them up. Like you can immediately tell that we're just very different. Yep. And I think those differences are perfect for building a startup together. The skill sets that we bring to the table are so different. Milo has this incredible design eye. He's a very aesthetic person and understands how people use things or interact with things or pay for things and how it solves their problems at a very almost artistic level, even if we're working in software. Kenny thinks of things in systems. He's a systems engineer. He studied systems at Stanford. And so beyond just engineering, which he's obviously amazing at, he has these frameworks of looking at the world in a very kind of by the book subjective way. And it's a little different from me, who tends to look at things a little bit more like philosophically and, a little bit more abstract or emotionally or whatever. But I would say am particularly good, or I don't want to say I'm good, but I'm the person who's most familiar with people and understanding just how people move and how they what makes them tick and all of that. And so, an easy way to kind of phrase how we work on Speakeasy is Milo designs, Kenny codes, and I sell. That is kind of productive. We all do everything and we all do everything together. But I do think it is an accurate statement in also how we just approach every problem. Whenever we have a problem that we're trying to solve, Milo's thinking about it from the perspective of how can the solution to this problem look and feel, and how should that be. Kenny's thinking about how should it work and how should it function, right? And I'm thinking about how can we put this in people's hands, make them want this more, or how does this relate to the user and all of that. And so that's our skill sets. But again, the most important thing is the fact that we're just like best friends. Yep. And we have such good personal chemistry, which in the past has been a challenge. Again, I'm not going to act like business and friendship always go together super well, but I think that challenge, like I said, has been good, has been net positive for us. Yep. And so that has been the biggest asset in this business by far.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of value in having complementary skill sets and bringing different things to the table. Yeah. So we're gonna hop into some rapid fire questions before I ask you the last question. Okay. Let's go right into it. What's your favorite book? It could be about business. It could be about life. Like what's been the best book you've read to help you become a better entrepreneur?
Oh, Okay, this is a weird answer. It's not about business at all. It's a corny answer, but it's called The Power of Now. It's by Eckhart Tolle. I've read a lot of the business books. We both read a lot of the same business books, and they're all good. They're all helpful. But I think, like I said, business is kind of a psychological game, and The Power of Now is just a pure book on being present. It's kind of like an abstract, Zen type book. But I do think a lot of those learnings have been more valuable to me in building a startup than really any of the other business lessons.
Wow. Yeah. Power Now. Great book. Great book.
Good book.
What's your favorite AI tool?
Oh man, it's gotta be Claude. I mean, I love Claude. I think that besides Speakeasy, which is an AI tool technically, it's gotta be Claude. I have a good relationship with Claude.
Nice.
We're intimate.
What's your biggest failure?
Oh man, I have so many. What's my biggest one? In high school, I had a lot of failures. I can't think of like a particular moment that was like independently defeating, but I remember there were just a lot of things in high school. I wasn't like the most academically, at least not compared. I went to a very competitive public high school, and so there were things that I just like did bad on like tests or exams or like these kind of conventional things that I was just like losing at. And again, the stakes for those may now seem lower than like a failure that we experienced at 24, 25 years old. But I think it happens at an age where failure is experienced far more tragically. And that was important for me because it was an early introduction to dealing with failure, which I think has been beneficial for me now. So I'd give you the broad answer of just like things that I dealt with in high school.
Yeah, you got to go through those.
Yeah.
I mean, as an entrepreneur,
it's mostly failure. Yeah, it's mostly failure.
Yeah, when you're raising money, most folks are going to say no.
Yeah, mostly failure.
How about the biggest win?
Oh man, I would say it's two things. I would say that raising money for this startup was a big win because it came after such a long drought of success for us. We were so in the trenches up until that point. We were living in a basement in Bowie, Maryland, Kenny's mom's basement. We were out of money completely. We were out of ideas before that. And so raising money for us was less of like a granted thing that a lot of people that we were around get and more of a real opportunity to succeed. The other one was when we started succeeding, a few months after raising money, we started succeeding on social media like pretty heavily, Speakeasy. It's something I'm very thankful for, but like my profile, the content that I make to promote Speakeasy blew up. Yeah. And I think that was important because it gives me a completely different and new reason to keep going because now I actually, even if we don't necessarily have like users or paying customers, we have followers, we have people that believe in us, and that is incredibly empowering. It's a reason to keep going.
Right.
So, yeah,
right. You're building a movement.
Yeah, building a movement. Yeah.
How about let's do your what do you think is the most underrated entrepreneurship skill?
I still think it's underrated, and I think it's communicating and speaking. I really think that. Like I know that people champion it, but I just don't think that people champion it enough. It is the most important thing. Your ideas are only as good as how you articulate them. Yep. They're not as good as what goes on in your mind because you need to be able to communicate them in order to get together other people to work on them. Yep. And I think that not a lot of people understand that. And speaking and communicating also involves listening. And a lot of entrepreneurs have huge egos. They're not able to listen or consider what other people are saying. You have to be able to take feedback and be able to iterate. And so I think that's the most important skill. And most underrated one too.
Nice. I'll do two more. If you could have coffee with anyone on the planet, I would say living or dead. Who would it be?
Living or dead? I'll probably stay with living. I'll give a weird answer here. I'd probably give you like a Christopher Nolan movie director. I think that the reason for that is because I feel like, a traditional answer here would be like a Zuckerberg or an Elon Musk, like some CEO. But I feel like all these guys or these people that are like successful startup founders, they love themselves. So there's so much content about them already. I feel like anything I would learn in that coffee, I can learn from a podcast that they did in the past or a book that they've written. But you take a director like Christopher Nolan who makes these like literal insane pieces of work. Yeah, they're movies, they're not startups, but I think directing a movie is very similar to building a startup. You're managing all these different stakeholders, you're trying to get this thing done on time, you're trying to make money from it, it's a business. And I would love to see how he merges like the business and the art of it all and manages all of these people, and how he has that much conviction that he can get these like A-listers to believe in his idea and execute it the way at the highest level. So I'd love to buy him a coffee and ask him those questions.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
He'd probably buy me the coffee. Yeah.
I've never thought about a movie director being compared to entrepreneurship. That's actually very true.
I think any creative pursuit is, anyone that's a creative is an entrepreneur in some way.
True.
You know, and he tends to be, he happens to be a successful one. And so I think like, I wouldn't necessarily ask him for business advice, but I would be so curious to hear his like intuition sense and what it is he does to be such a leader in an industry that is also riddled with a lot of ego and a lot of talent and star power.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. What's the best investment you've made in yourself?
Oh man. Maybe another corny answer, but I would say emotional investment is my relationships. Again, I think slept on. I think that people don't understand that relationships are a thing that you invest in with time and with patience. I think that to some degree, friendship should be an obligation. People act like it's not. People act like it's supposed to be this thing that like is like just an easy part of your life. But I think you should treat it like a job in many ways, where whether or not you want to, you should be attentive and patient with the people that are in your life. That is the only support system you really have, especially in the early stages of building a business. That's been my experience of it. And so that's been a really good, like, I think I've always been very conscious of that. And I've been, if nothing else, an investing friend with the people around me. And like, I mean, look where that's brought me now. I get to build a business with them. Yeah. But aside from that, I would say probably like YouTube Premium is a really good investment.
Yeah.
No ads. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Likewise. All right, this brings me to the last question. Tell us about a moment or experience that served as a springboard for you to become the person you are today. And this could be like, I don't know, a book you read or a moment you had with a coach or whatever. Like, it could be really anything, but something that was a springboard for you that kind of launched you guys to get to where you are today.
All of us, or just for me?
I'll say for you.
For me, yeah, because I would say for me, the answer, there's two. The answer for just me was probably at a much earlier age. I think that for me, the experience was when I was very young. We moved to America. I was born in Bangladesh, and I grew up in Texas. I played American football, which was interesting in Texas. That's a huge sport, very competitive, and I was in a locker room full of guys that look completely different from me. I was the only like Muslim brown kid in this locker room filled with just like other races, people that I was just nothing like. And I think that experience just taught me to be the type of person that I am. It showed me at a very early age how to get along and communicate with people that are completely different from myself. Of course, playing the sport taught me how to work with people and be a leader in some ways. But most importantly, it was just a way for me to build bridges with those who were completely different from me, which is what I'm also doing in the startup game. And I think that experience was in so many ways pivotal. It taught me how to be emotionally perceptive, empathetic with the people around me, reading a room, especially a room that maybe I never had any experience reading before. And so that experience was extremely formative. And I would say it kind of one-to-one did springboard into this entrepreneurship thing, even if it may not seem like it, because I felt like the same rush or the same like excitement I had in understanding the people around me when I was in that locker room is what I was looking for in my professional career and couldn't find anywhere outside of building a startup that was in consumer. And so that's what I would say our springboarding experience. And then as a team, it has to be the basement in the basement in Bowie. The basement in Bowie.
Talk about that.
The basement in Bowie was just. It was humbling, I think, was the most important thing. I think that we, as like Stanford grads, were so used to seeing all these kids that would just graduate and raise a ton of money, or even raise money like the moment they stepped into Stanford and just drop out. And everyone made it look so easy. And we, at that point, once we moved into the basement, we were kind of just reduced to us as people. We had nothing else. We didn't even have an idea. We were literally just reduced to like our intelligence, our skill set, and our ability to work with one another. And there was no other resource that we had available to us. And I think that was a true test of our ability to withstand one another and be patient with each other and like lean on each other in a situation where there was nothing else to lean on. But also it was a true vacuum in building and evaluating an idea that would take us out of the basement, really. It wasn't just like an idea that we built because we could have. It was an idea we built because we had to. And I think that was extremely formative. And like, in some ways, I think all three of us, we never say it, but we kind of miss it, And like, that was a really interesting, fun time, and something that I'll probably tell my kids about, So it was exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in, I guess, the isolation.
Yeah, man.
And like you said, it was a vacuum. Like
it was a vacuum.
It was just you guys in a basement trying to get out.
Yeah, trying to get out. Like, it was crazy. And like, none of us had any. I had just left had recently left my job at Poly Delta, and Kenny and Milo, neither of them were like applying to any jobs or anything. So we had no prospects, and we weren't pursuing them. It was either succeed in this startup thing or nothing. And I think we needed to have our backs against the wall in the way that we, like, figuratively, in the way that we did in that basement, in order for us to figure this out. I think we needed that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a big lesson for folks listening too, because betting on yourself, going all in, no A, B, C plans.
None of that.
This is it. We're gonna figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to act like I'm this person who like was truly all or nothing. Like, again, I'm completely aware that I had a college degree that I could have put to use if I needed it, and I knew that at the time too. So that was a hedge, but it was at the time for me the biggest test of my conviction that I could have taken. It was the biggest the craziest thing I could have done to really see how much I'm about this, and I think that is important. I think that you should see what is the biggest risk you can take, and if it's reasonable, take it. Because, like I said, this is a game of psychology. It's a conviction measuring test, and you really don't know how much conviction you have until you put that to the test. And like, the basement for us was the exam room. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is awesome. Where can folks find you? What are your social medias, YouTube, all that kind of stuff? Where can people get in touch with you?
I make a ton of content. So NPC Faizan, Faizan is my Instagram handle. I'd say that's probably the best place to find me. I think on TikTok that's also my handle. Or just, like, maybe just my name, Faizan, Faizan. NPC Faizan is also my YouTube. But start at that Instagram. It's an easy place to find me, and then from there you can find everything else.
Nice. Well, I hope this was helpful to folks. We're gonna wrap there.
Yeah.
My guy.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate you, bro. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.